Inside Texas Politics, 3rd edition by Brandon Rottinghause. Texas Government 2306, Chapter 8, Part 1. Chapter 8, Governors of Texas. On June 17, 2001, the Texas state legislature faced down the Father's Day massacre. Nothing like it had ever happened before. In a single day, Texas Governor Rick Perry axed 82 bills. The vetoed legislation spanned a wide gamut of issues, ranging from the expansion of legal charitable bingo games to the banning of death penalty for convicted killers with mental disabilities. Why did Perry do it? The state legislature had spent valuable time and taxpayer money crafting the legislation, some of which passed with overwhelming support. Yes, the majority of the bills had Democrats as sponsors, 56 out of 82, and Perry was Republican. But bills from Republicans were also terminated, and many legislators didn't get courtesy calls that the governor was going to veto their bill, which was a long-standing tradition. Charges of a power grab and political payback echoed throughout the state capitol. Governor Perry's message was clear. He would be a strong and active governor. He intended to invigorate the Republican Party at a time when Democrats and Republicans were vying for control of the legislature. Perry was determined to cement the development of a strong Texas governor, even though historically the Texas executive branch has been weak and divided, as discussed in Chapter 9. Fast forward almost 20 years, as re-elected Governor Greg Abbott took the stage on January 15th, 2019, through a line of crossed swords for his second inaugural address. He promised more bipartisanship. Abbott's conciliatory stance came in response to a bruising election for his party in 2018. With Democrats unseating 12 Republicans in the Texas House, he presented a blueprint for earnest work on issues Texans cared about: strengthening local schools, slashing the state's property tax burdens, and cracking down on human trafficking. Then he used all the tools at his disposal and successfully pushed his agenda through. Perry and Abbott, like governors before them, battled both legislature and other powerful members of the executive branch. These struggles are a legacy from the past. Fearful of unchecked executives following Texans' unpleasant experience with Reconstruction, Governor Edmund Davis, every state constitution since that time has maintained a plural executive and limited the governor's power. And yet, through political will, party strength, and personal relationships, modern Texas governors are more powerful today than at any time in the state's history. In this chapter, we take an in-depth look at the roles and powers of the Texas governor. We first outline the rules of the office, including the eligibility to serve, succession in office, length of term, and removal from office. We then examine the formal and informal powers of the governor. We end by evaluating whether the Texas governor is weak or strong and examining the consequences for Texas government. 8.1 The Rules of the Office. The Texas Constitution defines who can run for governor, how long the governor can stay in office, and under what conditions he or she serves. These rules also affect the power of relationships between the governor and the rest of the government. In the Lone Star State, for example, the state legislature can use these rules to threaten the governor with impeachment. On the other hand, the length of governor's term and the lack of term limits place a popular governor in a strong position relative to state legislators. Eligibility. To serve as governor, an individual must be at least 30 years of age, a citizen of the United States, and a resident of Texas for at least 5 years immediately preceding his or her election. The governor cannot hold any office civil, military, or corporate during the term, and cannot accept any salary, reward, or compensation, or the promise of these for any service rendered or performed. Interestingly, the governor need not be an eligible voter. Governor W. Lee Pappy O'Daniel was a registered voter but had not paid his poll tax when a fee was required to vote, and could not even vote for himself in the 1938 election. Informal qualifications. Formal qualifications for governor are minimal, but informal qualifications such as race, gender, profession, political experience, social network, charm, and charisma also factor in. A 1962 Houston Chronicle editorial submitted that an ideal candidate for the office of governor needs brilliance of mind, legal knowledge, political experience, and sound knowledge of business and industry. And one can add that almost all Texan governors have been white Protestant men with previous political experience. Texans have elected lawyers, bankers, baseball team owners, ranchers, and even a flour manufacturer to the highest office in the state. But the political environment has changed since 1962, as the media and online social networking have made politics more accessible. In 2006, a Jewish country singer and satirist, Kinky Friedman, challenged Rick Perry for the governor's seat and received almost 13% of the vote. His campaign slogan was, "How far could it be? How hard could it be?" Terms. Originally suspicious of executive power after the break with Mexico, the delegates at the Constitutional Convention of 1876 limited the governor's term 2 years. In 1972, however, voters amended the Texas Constitution to extend the term to 4 years in order to reduce the frequency of elections and allow the governor to focus on governing rather than campaigning for re-election. The expansion of time in office allows Texas governors to amass more power by leading the state for a longer term. This means more opportunities for appointments, more favors granted, and a more significant say in 2 rather than 1 legislative sessions. There are no term limits, so an individual can run for governor as often as he or she wishes. Traditionally, most governors have served only 1 term, so the average length of term since 1846 has been about 3.5 years. Governor Rick Perry broke that mold by serving as governor for more than twice as long as the 40 previous governors. See figure 8.1. Removal from office. Impeachment is a legal process in which the legislative branch has the authority to indict and remove a public official. The state legislature can impeach both elected and non-elected officials. It carries out this process in 2 stages. First, the Texas House of Representatives must cast a majority vote in favor of impeachment. Second, the Texas Senate sits as a jury, hearing and evaluating the evidence in a trial setting. To convict an individual who has been impeached by the House and remove that person from office, 2/3 of the Senate must agree. Once removed, an individual is disqualified under the Texas Constitution from holding any office of honor, trust, or profit in the state. Article 15, Section 4. Unlike the U.S. Constitution, the Texas Constitution provides no specific grounds for impeachment. The charges are generally criminal in origin, but on occasion they involve the misuse of public office. For instance, State District Judge O.P. Carrillo was impeached in 1976 for misuse of county funds, for which he later spent 3 years in prison. Only one governor, James E. Pa Ferguson, has been impeached in Texas history. After an unremarkable first term, Governor Ferguson raised the ire of the legislature when he vetoed the appropriation for the University of Texas because the University Board of Regents refused to remove certain faculty members whom the governor found objectionable. The governor was indicted on 9 criminal charges, including misapplication of public funds and embezzlement, non-enforcement of state banking laws, and receipt of a mysterious $156,500, the source of which the governor refused to identify. The Texas House impeached him on 21 articles, and the Texas State Senate convicted the governor on 10 of them, calling the process a kangaroo court. Governor Ferguson submitted his resignation one day before the Senate rendered its final judgment. When he ran again for governor in 1918, he argued that he could still hold office despite the impeachment because he was never convicted. He was easily defeated by William P. Hobby in the Democratic Party. Then in 1924, Paul Ferguson helped to elect his wife, Miriam A. Ma Ferguson, to the governor's office. The 1924 slogan went, "Me for Ma, and I ain't got a darned thing against Pa." Succession. If the governor resigns, is removed, or dies in office, the lieutenant governor becomes the governor in what is called a political succession. The lieutenant governor also serves as the acting governor when the governor is out of the state. Lieutenant Governor Preston Smith served as governor for 277 days during the term of John Connally, 5 weeks of which covered Connally's African safari. Salary and staff. The current annual salary of the governor is $150,000 a year. This salary puts Texas governors in the middle of the income spectrum for governors nationally. In practice, many modern governors of Texas are wealthy before they enter office, often as a result of careers in real estate, ranching, or law. Taxpayers, however, pay large sums to ensure the governor's security when he travels. Governor Greg Abbott's annual security tab to the Department of Public Safety exceeds $1 million when he ran in the new year on a business trip to Japan. He insisted that his trip was not taxpayer funded, which was true, but the cost of the travel, meals, and lodging of the taxpayer funded staff that accompanied him amounted to $83,000. The Texas governor's office employs almost 300 staff members who perform a range of services, including press relations, legal advice, scheduling and advance work, human resources, and expert policy advice, especially on the budget. Top advisors can earn as much as $265,000 per year. These staff works closely with the governors to create, sharpen, and support the governor's priorities, as well as to protect the governor's image and govern the executive branch. The Texas governor has a large staff in comparison to his counterparts. See Figure 8.2. 8.2. Formal powers of Texas governors. The Texas Constitution outlines the formal powers granted to the governor. Governors use these formal powers to implement laws, manage the executive branch, push policies through state legislature, check the judicial system, and protect Texans, particularly in the aftermath of natural disasters. Execution of laws. Like the U.S. Constitution, the Texas Constitution charges that the governor as the state's chief executive must cause the laws to be faithfully executed. Although the 1876 Texas Constitution is vague with respect to carrying out the responsibility, governors over time have expanded their executive authority through executive orders and proclamations. Today, governors have wide latitude in controlling the operations of the state, especially state agencies. Governors often issue unilateral executive orders to execute laws. See Figure 8.3. These orders have force law and often make use of powers granted to the governor by the legislature. Governors use executive orders for several purposes: to create task forces, to assist with policy development, to respond to natural disaster and other emergencies, to fill interim political appointments, to call special session of the legislature, to issue emergency items for legislative consideration, and to hold special elections. For example, Governor Abbott suspended more than 200 laws or regulations, from vehicle registration and inspection requirements for victims of Hurricane Harvey to local hotel and motel occupancy taxes for the 14 days following the storm. Governors also use these orders to manage executive agencies and to push their political agenda, especially if they are up against opposition in the legislature. See Figure 8.4. To battle a rising state deficit, Republican Governor Bill Clements, who faced a majority Democratic legislature, directed each agency with an operation budget of $10 million, over $10 million, to conduct an internal audit to find ways to save money. Proclamations are similar to executive orders but are used to make factual determinations, such as to declare a state of emergency and trigger other available powers, such as the ability to ask for disaster relief funds. These orders can also serve purely ceremonial purposes, allowing the governor to play a public role in the political culture of the state. Following the tragic 2019 mass shooting at Walmart in El Paso, Governor Abbott proclaimed state flags to be flown at half-staff to honor those who had lost their lives. After the Houston Astros won the World Series in 2017, Governor Abbott proclaimed November 3rd to be Houston Astros Day, likening the team spirit and resolve to that of Texas in the wake of Hurricane Harvey's devastation. The use of unilateral power has been met with legislative backlash. In 2005, Governor Perry issued Executive Order 47, ordering the Commissioner of Education to establish a requirement that at least 65% of school districts' revenue be used for classroom instruction. In 2007, the governor issued an executive order mandating that all 11 and 12-year-old girls get an HPV, human papillomavirus vaccine, which protect women and teens against a sexually transmitted disease that causes cervical cancer. In both instances, the legislature overturned the actions. Appointment powers. Another way in which the governor manages the executive branch and implements laws is through the power of appointment. In all, a governor can make appointments to more than 3,000 positions in executive agencies, boards, and commissions, all non-legislative offices. Most governors have opportunity to fill out about 1/3 of these positions in a 4-year term. Because of these appointees' political power, and because appointments require Senate approval, the selection is often continuous. Governor Connolly once joked, "If you want to talk about real infighting, try making an appointment to the Board of Cosmetology." Appointments can be a political in function and appearance. During single term as a governor, Ann Richards made good on her campaign promise to make government look like the people of Texas. 48% of her first 650 appointments were female, 12% were black, and 25% were Hispanic. This diversification did not sit particularly well with all segments of Texas. On one occasion, Richards appointed Democratic State Representative Guerrero to a vacancy left on the Texas Railroad Commission, while John Sharp was serving as comptroller on the day of the appointment. Sharp received a phone call from an angry oil man who demanded to know, "Who the hell is Leonard Guerrero?" Sharp answered, "It's worse than you think. It's Lena Guerrero." After Republicans won legislative majorities in the 2002 election, the state legislature surrendered much of its power to appoint and oversee boards and commissions to Republican Governor Perry, a move that seems contrary to Texans' long-held desire to restrict the power of the executive branch. Strong appointment powers raise the potential for cronyism as governors appoint influential political allies. For instance, in 2019, Governor Abbott appointed his longtime political ally, Ruth Ruggiero, to Secretary of State, an agency with a sprawling mandate that includes elections. As the former chair of the Texas Workforce Commission, Ruggiero had been snared in a scandal over secretly coordinating with lobbyists for Handy, a company pushing for legislation to rewrite labor regulations. The governor's appointment powers were not absolute, however. The appointment power is shared with the Texas Senate, which must approve then appointee with a 2/3 majority. If the Senate is in recess, the governor's appointee stays in office until the state Senate votes on the nominee during the first 10 days in session. The legislator can almost limit the term to be served by a person appointed by the governor, should it wish to do so. Some boards and commissions also require by law that the representation be balanced by geography, a professional background, thereby limiting the governor's discretion. Legislative powers. A major function of the governor is to work with legislator. An effective governor focuses on 2 or 3 key goals to push through a sometimes friendly but more often hostile legislator. The Texas political system splits policy-making power between the legislative and executive branches of government, making for tense political interactions, policy agendas, election promises, different constituency demands, and divergent ideological approaches frame the skirmishes between the branches. Let's take a look at the powers governors employ during these skirmishes. Recommending legislation. By constitutional mandate, governors are allowed to suggest legislation to the legislator. Many governors take a direct role in the legislative arena. Governor Dolph Briscoe pledged to legislators that most persistent lobbyist you will see this session is the governor of Texas. Indeed, the introverted Briscoe successfully pushed through property protection laws, a streamlined penal code, and ethics reform legislation. Legislative emergencies. During the first 60 days of each legislative session, lawmakers are barred from passing legislation. Instead, they focus their time on organizing each chamber, holding hearings on legislation, and debating issues. Only the governor can break through this line. The Texas Constitution allows the governor to declare an emergency item and have it to be prioritized in the first 60 days. These emergencies enable governors to highlight their pet issues and advance their political agenda. Governors then prioritize controversial matters to ensure that the legislator hears these issues first. As the outset of the 2011 legislative session, just before the 2012 elections, in which Governor Rick Perry was to run for president, the governor asked the legislator for 2 emergency items: to require a doctor to perform an ultrasound on pregnant women before an abortion, and to require voters to present their photo IDs before voting. Both issues were red meat to the conservative Republican base across the country, where he hoped to win points for his candidacy. Governor Greg Abbott declared emergencies in 2019 that calmed the raging political storm and focused on issues voters cared about: reforming public school finance, beefing up response to natural disasters, and improving mental health programs. Special sessions. After the biennial 140-day session is over, the governor has the power to call the legislature into special session, which can last up to 30 days. The governor sets the specific agenda for the session and can call as many as desired. For this reason, these sessions are often called the governor's session. The legislator can only consider legislation related to that issue. No other issues can be discussed. However, the governor's ability to call the session does not extend to issues that are executive or judicial in character, such as appointments or impeachments. Recent governors have been more targeted in their calls, directing the legislator clearly on what issues they should discuss. See Figure 8.5. Historically, special sessions are more likely in times of war, depression, and financial crisis. In modern Texas, special sessions are more likely to be called when the legislator is gridlocked over a specific issue or when an issue politically challenged and cannot be solved in the regular 140-day legislative session. Special sessions have been arranged in duration from 30 seconds to 30 days. On the short end, Governor Pat Neff vetoed the appropriations bill sent to him by the legislature and called a special session for the day after the adjournment of the regular session. Incensed by the governor's tactics and frustrated that they could not return home to receive their mileage allowance, the legislature adjourned the special session without conducting any business. Governors can call a special session for any reason and at any time outside of the biennial 140-day session. The governor's call by executive proclamation lets the legislators know what's on the menu for the session. Special sessions are politically risky for governors. However, the session can focus on the governor's agenda, but a failed session can hurt a governor politically and make him or her appear weak. Perceptions of the ineffective leadership also hurt a governor's re-election effort. Governor Greg Abbott called a special session in 2017 that included 20 items, including one must-pass item to allow an extension of specific agendas or agencies. Opponents rallied behind the phrase sunset and sundial, meaning pass the must-pass bill and then adjourn. Supportive Republican legislator wore lapel buttons that read, "Pass them all." Ultimately, the legislator only passed half of his agenda and adjourned early. But the ideological tone of the special session allowed the governor to claim credit for pushing more conservative policies. Veto powers. All constitutions in Texas have given the governor or president under the republic the power of veto. It is often called the governor's gift. Because it is such a valuable bargaining tool, a governor's veto must include a set of reasons for objection, which are sent to the chamber that introduced the original bill. The veto is the governor's strongest constitutional power in his or her struggle with the state legislature. See Figure 8.6. The governor has 10 days, excluding Sunday, to sign or veto the bill, or the bill automatically becomes law. Governors typically only let a few bills become law without signature. But in 2019, Governor Abbott let 144, or 11% of all bills taking effect, become law without his signature. If the legislator feels strongly enough about the legislation to reconsider, a 2/3 of the members of both chambers can override the veto. If the legislator adjourns after submitting a bill to the governor, but before a normal 10-day period would have expired, the governor has 20 days from the receipt to veto the legislation or the bill becomes law. During these periods when the legislature is adjourned, the governor can veto legislation without the threat of an override by the legislator. Governors often use the veto to bring state policy in line with their political philosophy. Governor Ross Sterling, a businessman who lacked political experience and adopted the view that limited government was best, vetoed the fewest bills. Miserably, with the state's finances, Governor Dan Moody vetoed 76 pieces of legislation and 4 specific budget items in 1929. He even went so far as to veto legislation that would have authorized funds for members of the Texas legislature to travel to Washington, D.C. to lobby for a new veterans hospital. Unlike the President of the United States, Texas governors have particularly effective defensive tool, the line item veto. See figure 8.7. A line item veto allows the governor to reject a specific provision in a bill without rejecting the whole bill. To the public and to some degree, the legislator expect the governor to use the line item veto to state spending. For instance, Governor Neff line item veto provisions amounting to more than $39 million. He used his veto to kill the proposed West Texas A&M College, stating that the appropriation was against the will of the state Democratic Party convention. Governor James V. Allred line item vetoed an 817 appropriation in 1937 for a hospital, noting that the state was already building one other hospital and didn't need a second. Vetoes are a powerful tool for Texas chief executive, as they are rarely overridden, partly because the legislature is often not in session. By the time governors veto bills from 1876 to 1968, only 25 out of the 936 vetoes were overridden. Since the 1960s, only 1 veto has been overridden. In 1979, Governor Clements vetoed legislation to limit the ability of county governments to prohibit hunters from killing female deer. The governor claimed that a central authority like Texas Park and Wildlife Department, not local governments, should be in charge of this initiative. The legislator bristled in part because of Governor Clements' approach to governing. He had declared that he was going to run Texas like a business and that I'm the chief executive officer and y'all can take it or leave it. The state legislature decided to leave it and overrode his veto. Because the difficulty in overturning a veto, even the threat of a veto from the governor, is a highly effective weapon. Governors threaten to veto legislation on matters when they are certain they can coerce the legislator to alter proposed legislation to their liking. Amid legislative belt-tightening in 2017, House and Senate budget negotiators planned to trim $300 million from Governor Abbott's prize pots of economic development funds, the Texas Enterprise Fund, his high-quality pre-kindergarten program, and a program for university scholar recruitment. The governor threatened to veto the budget, and legislators abandoned their planned cuts. Military powers. Just as the president is the commander-in-chief in the U.S. military, the Texas governor serves as commander-in-chief in the Texas military forces, except when they are called into service of the United States. In practice, this means that the governor is in charge of the National Guard, appointing an adjutant general of the Guard and directing the Guard to protect lives and property. The Guard is most often used during natural disasters such as Hurricane Harvey, the northern Texas wildfire, or the Marble Falls flooding. The National Guard also protects the state in times of crisis. In 2019, Governor Abbott dispatched the National Guard to the border. He argued that he was forced to act because a string of failures by the federal government in stemming the tide of undocumented immigration, including drug smugglers and unaccompanied minors from Central America. Abbott stated there is an escalating crisis at the border, a crisis Congress is refusing to fix. More than 133,000 immigrants, mostly from Central America, illegally crossed the Texas border in 2019, a greater than 40% increase over the prior year, approximately 1,000 strong. The deployment cost $18 million per month in an effort to boost the law enforcement presence near the border. Opponents claim that the governor overreacted and that deploying new troops to the border solves nothing. Judicial Powers, pardon, and clemency. In criminal cases, except for treason and impeachment, the governor has the power to grant reprieves and commutations of punishment, remit any fines and forfeitures, and issue clemency, reduction or delay of a sentence or pardons, forgiveness for a crime, with written support of a majority of Texas prisons boards. In capital murder cases, the governor can grant a temporary jailhouse reprieve for 30 days on his own, without board of approval. In a 1925 case, for example, Governor Neff pardoned the famous bluesman Huddy William Ledbetter, better known as Leadbelly, who was incarcerated in a Sugar Land prison for murder. In order to appear tough on crime, modern governors rarely use clemency or pardon powers. The governor's ability to pardon is not absolute. Governor James E. Pa Ferguson exercised the power of the pardon so frequently that he was said to have an open-door policy. At the Texas Penitentiary, Ferguson issued 2,253 pardons in just 2 years, a state record. In one instance, coming to the office to discuss clemency, a man placed several bills in Governor Ferguson's palm. When he shook hands, Governor Miriam Ma Ferguson, 1925 to 1927, 1933 through 1935, wife to Pa, was also criticizing for abusing the pardon system, which led to legislative reforms. In 2 years, she granted 1,161 pardons, and rumors began circulating that pardons were being sold. Approaches were made to practically all members of the Ferguson family, including a blatant offer to the Ferguson daughter of $5,000 to use her influence to secure a pardon. The legislature then passed a law to ensure that the governor must first receive majority support from the appointees of the Board of Pardons and Paroles before granting clemency or pardons or remitting crimes. This is the end of Chapter 7, Part 1.